The true story of Son of Sam, David Berkowitz, on August 10th, 1977, after the largest manhunt in New York City history, New York City Police Department captured the infamous serial killer known as the Son of Sam, who was for more than a year terrorized both their city and the nation, referring to himself as the Duke of Death and the Wicked King Wicker. He had set more than 2,000 fires, shot and killed 6 people, and wounded 7 more. Today I'm going to show you that through David's own words and decades of living a transparent life in Christ, that even a serial killer can go from a son of the devil to the son of God. Greetings, everybody. My name is Stephen Garofalo. This is Reason for Truth, where the truth comes first and the reasons come last, but where we're always in constantly learning, because when we stop learning, we stop teaching, or at least stop teaching well. This is the channel and the organization that helps both Christian and non-Christian, cut through the fog of culture's distorted truth, because in our relative world, the truth doesn't change, but the human will to distort it certainly does. And we cut through the distortion of current events with the truth as an antidote to the false messages that are so pervasive in our world today. Before we get started, boom, hit that old Gancio Sinistra. Make sure you subscribe. And if you really want to go deep, you check out equippedacademy.com. That's the bottom line. Listen, Son of Hope, the story of David Berkowitz. David Berkowitz, personally, as you know, on this channel, we have a whole page dedicated to his ministry, by the way, which is ariseandshine.org, O-R-G. You want to check it out. David's doing great things, man. I'm telling you, in culture and for the culture, for Jesus Christ, that is, in our culture. And he's reaching people. He has licenses most of us don't have, if not all of us that are listening to this or watching this today. And that is, his credentials include access 24/7 to a maximum security prison, because he lives in one. He's on fire for the Lord. He's been that way for many decades. And that's the point and the whole focus of today's episode. But having said that, I do like to promote David's material. And I want this story, he personally emailed this to me. This was, and I'm going to give you the reference. It was an article that he gave. And so I'm going to share that. It was from an essay on religion from Salvo, number 19, in Great Escapes by Terrell Clemens. And I think, if I remember, put a link to that below, but you can Google that. And then it's titled Son of Hope, the Story of David Berkowitz. David Berkowitz, from Son of Sam to Son of Hope. That's what he says. He got a book by that name. I think this is important, really, because I think this is a great story, which I'm going to share with you today, right from the letter, basically. It's going to tell you just about really the magnificent story of David. You're probably not going to hear in the mainstream media, because they tend to want sensationalism and gore and action, and to listen, they always need a bad guy. Well, David was a bad guy. He's not a good guy, and that's what we want to share with you today. Listen, an essay on religion from Salvo 19, again, from Great Escapes. I want to repeat that, by Terrell Clemens, and I want to again say, go check out ariseandshine.org. For you can see David's writings. He writes. He doesn't have access to a computer, but he has a typewriter, and he does write different kind of blog materials and articles. So you want to check that out. But anyways, on August 10th, as I said, 1977, after the largest manhunt in New York City, which says a lot in history, New York City Police Department finally caught the infamous serial killer known as the Son of Sam. Or, he had terrorized both their city and the whole nation. I know I was actually spending 2 weeks with my grandmother in New York. I was on Long Island. She had a house in Brooklyn. And, I was just scared to death. And my grandmother finally said to me, "Stephen, don't worry, that's in the city, not out here." And that was true. But I remember getting up middle of the night, kind of peeking out the window, make sure no one was there. I do remember that. But he referred to himself again as the Duke of Death, and we're going to talk about that. And the Wicked King Wicker, speaking of the Wiccan religion, which led to Satanism. Now, he had as well set more than 2,000 fires, shot and killed 6 people, wounded 7 more, and left a bizarre hand-scrawled notes with messages like, "Police, let me haunt you with these words. I'll be back, explanation, to be interpreted as bang, 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 ugh, UGH, explanation." Pretty scary. As a suspect was being removed from his car, one of the officers asked him, "Are you glad it's over?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm very glad." The arresting officers were taken back. The Son of Sam, he said he wanted to bring New York City to its knees, and in many ways he had. And so now he appeared relieved to have been stopped. And that's true. We talk about that in my book, Right for You But Not for Me, A Response to Moral Relativism, about what you cannot not know. The mind knows, and it drives serial killers crazy. That's why they leave notes and they have an MO. They do something. I was watching a show the other night. The guy would stuff stuff in the in his victim's mouth. So they always know it was him by that little. So why do they leave these things? Why do they leave? Why does the Zodiac leave Zodiac? Why does David leave notes? Well, did he leave notes? The reason is in their heart they don't feel remorse, but in their mind they know it's wrong because God put it, and it's called the moral law, natural law. They come together, but it drove David crazy. But the article goes on to write that after a troubled youth, David, as an adopted child, he had a lot of problems in his youth, but as an adult, he was relieved. He's terribly tormented man for most of his life. He had spun desperately out of control. He was born in Brooklyn in June 1st, 1953. I was born in Brooklyn as well as a young man. David Berkowitz had been adopted at birth by Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz of the Bronx. They were devoted parents, but from childhood, David was plagued with mysterious emotional problems, including anger and severe bouts of depression. As a youth, David would hide under his bed for hours, lock himself in a closet, or sit on the window ledge of their 6th-floor apartment, legs dangling, flirting with suicide. And when he was 14, his mother died, sadly, and things deteriorated from there. He got into fights, or he cut school to wander the streets. He joined the Army after graduation, hoping for a fresh start, but there too had difficulties coping, and he returned to the Bronx. And about 3 years, when his 3 years in the military was up, he was hoping to find a girlfriend, maybe settle down, get married, have a family, and eke out a decent civilian life. Now, David's life then evolved from troubled to really deranged, and this is where the real trouble started. Now, most of his high school crowd had moved on by this time, and his father had remarried, and he moved to Florida. So what else did he have to do? David followed them deep into the woods of the park, these people that had befriended him, and where another group of people had a fire started. And this is where it all started. Some were drinking, some were singing, some were chanting. And David says, what is this? And they said, well, we're pagans. Someone said, and witches, witchcraft and Wiccan. And they said, we come out here to have a good time. David was alone. He was troubled, obviously. He was aimless. And as a result, he started to get influenced and hang out with this crowd. They had circles, pentagrams, that's Wiccan and witchcraft. And they would engage in rituals. They'd meditate and call on supernatural powers. And this is where David moved from Wicca to Satanism, I believe. Article didn't say that, but he began reading the Satanic Bible, the 1969 work of Anton LaVey, founder of the Satanic Church, or the Church of Satan, in San Francisco. Someone told David that Satanism would give him power and control over his life, which is something really David had always wanted. And as a result, David continued to read the Satanic Bible and take part in the rituals. This is when things begin to change with him. David began to believe he was some kind of soldier in the Satanic army. So while Satan's job was to destroy, the ultimate aim, according to this twisted new outlook, was to bring about God's kingdom of peace, believe it or not. Somehow that's what Satan always acts, right, as an angel of light. You see, David had always wanted something to commit his life to, and he surrendered himself to the satanic power that he thought was going to give him a mission in life, mission and purpose. This is where David's life began to move, really from despair to hope, I should say a false hope. For more than a year, David would wield a certain power to steal and kill and destroy, but the promise of a good outcome turned out to be hollow, and instead of a mission in life, he found himself looking at a new life in prison, where he had virtually no control over anything. For the next 10 years, he went about prison life as despondent as ever. But one night, 1987, it was winter, and that was just about the year I graduated from college, 1988, 1 year prior. But in 1987, it was winter. It was very cold, as it is up in the Northeast, and David was pacing the prison yard when another inmate approached him and said, "Hey, you're David Berkowitz, right?" And David said in response, "Yeah. What of it?" And this fellow prisoner said to David, he said, "Jesus Christ loves you very much." David responded by saying, "Listen, God ain't interested in me. I appreciate it, but God is not for me." You see, David knew he wasn't a good person. He knew what he had done. But his fellow prisoner wasn't put off so easily. And he said in response to David, well, you don't understand. God loves you. And if you'd let me, I'd like to be your friend. And his name was Rick. What a wonderful thing. Who would think you'd find that in a maximum security prison? And the two of these guys, David and Rick, they became friends. They began to walk the prison yard together. A few weeks later, Rick handed David a pocket Bible and suggests David read the Psalms, which is smart. David's Jewish, and he would understand that certainly much more than the New Testament, at least to start with. So David thought to himself, what do I have to lose? Right? A good question. So he started reading the Psalms, and surprisingly, David was shocked and amazing to find some of the most beautiful words he had ever read. And one night, alone in his cell, he read these words, "This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all his troubles." That's Psalm 34:6. At these words, something broke inside David. You see, David had been troubled most of his life. He had prayed to God saying, listen, God, I can't take this anymore. That's what he did. He got down on his knees after he read the Psalms, and he said, if you're out there, if you want anything to do with me, I'm sick of having to live with knowing that I've hurt innocent people, knowing that I've destroyed lives. I'm sick of the devil. I'm sick of being lied to. And in the quietness of his prison cell, David Berkowitz poured out his burdens, his needs, and in tears until he was utterly silent. And when he finally got up off his knees, he said he just felt a tremendous burden had been lifted. He didn't understand what had happened, but he knew that life had somehow it was never going to be the same, but it was going to be different from now on. And that night, David said he slept like a baby. Therefore, he continued reading the Bible Rick had given him, and he found in there, he found hope and he found encouragement. It lifted him, really, this Bible, the power, and I'd say the power of the Holy Spirit lifted him out of despair that he could never shake off before in his own strength. So over time, the prison Bible studies, as he got engaged with Bible study in prison, but those studies and chapel services he got involved with, and he began sharing his faith with other prisoners. And it was pretty neat. He met other inmates who had dark past, just as he did. And I think David had credibility with them, They could listen to him much before they are you and I. So, for the rest of his time in life, he said, he's going to share his faith. And he began to help people to see the truth and know the truth and show them the hope that he has in Jesus Christ. So David's not just another jailhouse conversion story, as jailhouse conversion stories go, or usually suspect. They're usually suspect in light of the real truth. But over the past 24 years, or really since 1976 is when he first went into prison, and certainly since 1987 when he, I would say, accepted Christ, his solid behavioral and spiritual track record has demonstrated an authentic, faith in Jesus Christ, something very radically different about David Berkowitz, and that can't be denied. A lot of people say, well, you got to be kidding me. They don't believe a serial killer could actually come to Christ and be repentant. Now, there's a whole nother episode we're going to do on consequences. Consequences are consequences. Being put in prison for life, that's a consequence for doing what he did, and he accepts that. So his faith is real, right? And for example, Rebecca Binger, who interviewed him in 2009 for the Pace Law Review, commented that he more resembled a retired police officer than a former serial killer. That's what she said. That's what she wrote. It's phenomenal, because I would say the same, and I've been writing David for many, many years. And his name made national news again in August 2011 when he announced that he would not seek parole when his next opportunity came in 2012. Responding to a letter from the Fox News reporter Joshua Rhett Miller, Berkowitz wrote this. He says, "I have no interest in parole. I'm already a free man. I'm not saying this jokingly. I really am. While society will never forgive me, God has. I am forever grateful for such forgiveness." Listen, and at the end of the day, David wrote me and he said, listen, I did the crime, I will do the time. He said, what he wrote to me, he said, I'd never do that to the families, because it would obviously, understandably really upset a lot of people, but the families, it would be terrifying and it would be absolutely upsetting, who lost loved ones, right? The survivors of the victims. And besides, he had a mission right where he is, right there in prison. And so, he said, right now my life is filled with deep inner peace and with the joy of the Lord. I'm, by the grace of God, doing and accomplishing many positive things. And by the way, David's as well an elder and worship leader in his prison church right there in prison. So, he's ministering to broken hearts and he says are being mended. He's there ministering where tormented minds are receiving deliverance and where damaged, bruised souls are getting healed. And he works as a mobility guide as well, a servant heart, right? And for the sight impaired inmates and he's a program aide for inmates with mental health impairments. That's a servant, okay? It's amazing. Binger, again, in the interview, called him a sort of a prison trustee. Some of the younger inmates call him Grandpa Dave. David, by the way, he writes a lot on his beloved electric typewriter. That's what it said. He's very few prisoners get electric typewriter. He does this because he's so trusted. Mostly the letters and the journals and entries which he writes on, again, ariseandshine.org are done on that typewriter. And they're uploaded by friends to his website, again, at ariseandshine.org. So now David shares his story with young people in churches and juvenile detention facilities, really through film and through writings, right? He can't just travel around. It's important to note that he doesn't write about the crimes in particular. He says he's probably never going to do that. He says, those are still too painful. I have great heaviness and continual sorrow in my heart over the lives that were destroyed through my own foolishness. And he said the victims, of the surviving families figure into David's decision not to take parole as well and to hurt them, right? As I said earlier, even if eligible, he says, I'll never want to do anything to add to their pain. David wrote me personally, by the way, as I said before, confirming, saying those exact same words to me. He'd never put the family members through any more pain and turmoil and sorrow by taking parole, he said. He says, I did the crime and I'm going to do the time. Now, David writes, and he really likes to communicate to youth to keep them out of trouble and the people of all ages, but he talks about his descent into this twisted web of satanic thought, especially for the benefit of other young people who might learn from his missteps, Though through Bart's mitzvahs as a youth, David says he had no real fear or respect of God. He said, I had to do whatever I felt like doing, whatever I felt good, that's what I did. He admits that in his prior life that he preferred darkness, witchcraft, and occult things. And he said, I watched countless horror satanic movies, particularly Rosemary's Baby, which totally captivated my mind, is what he said. And he says he realizes now that he was been slowly boiled, slowly deceived. And he says, I do not know that bad things were going to result from all this. Yet over the months, the things that were wicked no longer seemed to be such as wicked. He says, I was headed down the road to destruction. I did not know it. And that's what now he says that's why he's the son of hope. David's friend and fellow prisoner Rick, who shared his faith with David, the Christian faith, and gave David his first Bible, was eventually transferred to another prison shortly thereafter, befriending David. But David thanks God every day for Rick, right? And though David had been incarcerated, he's been there since 1976, he says he's no longer sees the prison bars. He says, my eyes are focused beyond that to see Jesus, who is the author and finisher of my faith. He says, my freedom is found in one word, Jesus. That's the bottom line, folks. God can forgive all. You got to be praying for David. He is having a big impact within the prison system and even outside through his writings. I want to encourage everybody. Go to ariseandshine.org. Support David that way. Check out his writings and be praying for him and all the people he might touch. That you want prison reform? Jesus Christ come in your life. Look at his life. That's true prison reform. Listen, if you've enjoyed today's content, you'd like to learn more about what we're doing, check out equippedacademy.com for online training. And you definitely want to join my community at StephenGarofalo.com. It's free. There is a membership as well for subscriber level, but you could just do that for free. Check it out. Subscribe it. We'll see you over there. I'm your host, Stephen Garofalo, and this is your Reason for Truth for today.